Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some, a lot, or an exceptional amount of money on the internet. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and Sammy. We're going to get into everything going on from the past 24 hours in just a moment. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is super, super risky. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Friday. It is the end of the week. It is the 12th of April. How are you feeling?
Jim, super excited. Last show, not only before the weekend, but more importantly, last show before I'm off to Dubai. You are flying on the weekend. I'm following on Monday. So really, really stoked for that. And other than that, I've been thinking a lot. I've been thinking a lot on a specific thing that Beanie said when it comes to sleeping. Beanie had that post out there where he was like, the most EV negative thing you can do right now is to sleep straight through the night. And the better way to do things is to have a cat nap and like sleep for 2 or 3 hours, wake up, be active for a couple of hours, go back to sleep again, and just not miss on basically a third of the day. And I've been like deliberately cutting down on my sleep to be able to farm blast more extensively. And I'm kind of thinking if this model wouldn't work, where I basically try to break my sleep in a couple intervals of a couple hours each.
Give it a go. What do you think? What would be the amendment to make? Like, how would you adjust it? Say a normal person gets 7 to 8. Maybe you're cutting that down to 6 anyway. Like, how would making it short, like splitting it up into little naps, better?
I mean, there's many ways to approach that fragmented sleep model. Obviously, it's popular amongst some athletes, sportsmen. Ronaldo did it and still probably does it, where he basically is up for 1.5 hours, sleeps for 45 minutes, and then cycles like that, which I couldn't do. I think realistically, maybe you could try to sleep 2 to 3 hours, 3 times a day, and like work in between. But I don't know if I have a hard time to even take a nap like after lunch. So I don't know if I can fall asleep during daytime, but I would kind of like to try it.
Interesting. Definitely run the experiment, just like you're running the juice experiment too. You want to hear some further analysis of that soon as well. Sammy, you're running on low sleep too. We had our little London meetup yesterday. How did you find it?
It's really good. It was great to see some more people, familiar faces. I think I might have frozen again. Have I frozen?
No, you're good.
No, still going. Yeah, it's good. Feel a bit rusty there. I think having 4 or 5 pints nowadays gives me a double day hangover, irrespective, even though I drink loads of water. So, yeah, I don't know how I do this, the 1 or 2 hour sleep thing. I just couldn't do it. I think because that relies on you getting to sleep very quickly, right? And then also waking up and having that, like being able to do that. But when it's light outside, unless you've got blackout curtains, that's pretty tough.
I agree. It's definitely challenging. I would find it very difficult. I just like routine, just like doing the same thing every single day. Go sleep early, wake up early, just get after it. But maybe I'm too simple. Need to further break down, come up with some better strategies. Funky, your hand is raised, went up straight away as Legendary was providing these controversial opinions on how to live life. What's your thoughts, Funky? Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are you thinking here?
GM friends, I was just going to say that there many famous people have done what Legendary described. I think like Henry Ford was a proponent of this, Einstein. I think Churchill used to do this. So there is something to be said about doing that like short nap and then just getting up and being productive. And but like to your point, I prefer the routine. Sammy, I totally understand that the whole drinking thing. Like as 48, your constitution goes downhill so fast. So I'm in the camp of get a good night's sleep and just do what you can during the day.
I'm more intrigued now. I like the list. I like Henry Ford, Einstein, Churchill, Legendary. All of them are doing that. I like that.
Your head is
I figured you would. I figured you would. I figured you would like that. So, you know, if nothing else, I'm giving you a little bit of credence to your what you're proposing here.
Let's find a list of abysmal people who have also tried to do the same thing just to balance it out. Alan in the YouTube comment says she hates routines as well. I think in the end, there's different ways to slice this stuff. And good luck to you, whichever way you choose. Mikhail in the comment saying, love naps. Wait till you have kids, though. Naps is the alpha. I don't know. I guess we'll come to those things at some point in time. Let's get into the news. The news, there's all kinds of stuff going on, predominantly on Bitcoin, actually. We're going to be focusing on that ecosystem in just a second. As always, this news comes to you from the Snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. I'm going to share the screen in a different way. We're going to do this. Yeah, we're going to do that. Actually, no, we won't do that. Okay, price action. Crypto, Bitcoin is back at 70K, very conveniently. ETH is down a couple of percent at 3.5. Solana is at $173. Headlines today. Bitcoin puppets flip Nodemonkes at 0.44 Bitcoin as the PUPs token hit $686 million market cap. I believe it's actually higher than that now. And potentially Nodemonkes have reflipped puppets back. So kind of an old headline being 1 hour late. But they're right there with each other. Number 2, Runestone artist Ordinal zooms to 0.06 Bitcoin floor. We need to talk about general Ordinal stuff more. I've got a great explainer tweet of like why this is all happening. We want to discuss it more in detail in today's show. And finally, Cyrus, the big NFT trader, lender, great guy, gives largest ever loan on gold hoodie Nodemonke at 1.25 BTC equivalent on ETH. So when I say largest ever, I mean the biggest one for a Bitcoin Ordinal asset so far. But the interesting detail there is that it had to get bridged over to ETH because you don't have the infrastructure built out yet on Liquidium to be able to do that. So that is interesting to see. Getting into some floor price action, we've got CryptoPunks holding on to the 40 ETH floor, got Bored Apes at 11.8, down a couple of percent, Mutants down 7% at 1.9, DGods at 1.4, Captains at 3.5, Azuki's at 4, Penguins down 1% at 11.5, Mad Lads up 5% at 149 Solana, and Noun's winning bid was at 7.6 ETH. Some top sales, XCOPY Hackproof sells for 29 ETH. This is actually one of my favorite XCOPYs. I think that looks really cool. And a CryptoPunk top hat selling for 69 ETH, which I believe people thought was a bit low for that top hat trait. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Anything catching your attention before we get into a bigger discussion day, bit of a roundup for the week, what we're looking forward to next week? What's catching your eye though at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. The redacted Remelios are up again. Miladies are down a bit, but redacted Remelios are up, I think, only 4%. But what I did see is that there is this Omni network click airdrop that goes to the top 10% of Eigenlayer restakers. That goes to, I think, everyone who has level 13 on Jumper, but also goes to some NFT holders, including Remelios, including Miladies, and once more doesn't go to Azuki's. And I'm like, damn, I wish I had a couple Miladies in my portfolio to be benefiting and profiting from those airdrops. But it's interesting that the news of that, and apparently it's supposed to be a big airdrop, given how like top centric it is, with focusing on the top restakers on Eigenlayer, that it didn't really move the floor prices too much because Miladies are down a bit. Remelios, yes, as I said, are up a bit, but no big move of that. So it seems like maybe those holders are just getting used to getting a constant supply of airdrops.
I think that's a really, really good point. Remember Remelios, maybe it might have been Miladies as well, both got the Athena airdrop, which has obviously been a very significant one. The synthetic dollar, that token came out at 60 cents. I got a bunch of it. New to hold, at least for a bit. It doubled to 120. I sold because I thought that, okay, I'm going to get more in the next airdrop because they're doing a continuous campaign. I think it's gone up to 140 now. So that one's really good. And as you say, Remedio's got those. Remedio's getting this as well. Like, does this become a buy to you at any point, Legendary? Like, would you want to get into this ecosystem if you think this is the trend for the next 5-6 months?
I don't know. Like, it's tough. You don't know how much more is coming. You don't know when snapshots have been taken. I made the point to be a bit careful with like a specific NFT airdrop play, to not buy Tensorian's as a leveraged exposure to a Tensor airdrop. But this somehow feels different because they're not getting a Miladies or a Remilios token. Obviously, they're getting exposure through partners of them or through protocols who just like those NFT collections. And I don't know how late we are in that stage. And you gamble on being early enough, on still having snapshots to come, and on the airdrops to be meaningful. And that's just too little information for me to be wanting to take that risk to like assume a significant position, because buying one Remilio isn't like, it would be nice, but if I wanted to go in, I wanted to go in a bit more of a substantial way. And for that, I have too little info, and then I think my opportunity costs might be too high.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I saw a really funny tweet yesterday. I'm going to go to Sammy straight after this because I think you've got a point to make. But I saw a funny tweet yesterday saying people bought and staked tier for all the airdrops when all you needed to do was buy a Bitcoin puppet or like something like that. Like people were thinking about these coins, which people have either got and then staked straight away. And it's like, where are the airdrops? I know they got like one round, maybe. Obviously, I mean, people are impatient in this space, but at the same time, people are like, well, where are the other stuff? Whereas the volume of stuff that it seems like Remilios and Miladies are getting, and also on the Ordinal side, like Bitcoin puppets, the amount that they've received from just having that one NFT is actually pretty insane. Sammy, what are your thoughts here? To what extent do you think some of these airdrops are actually just priced in now?
Well, that is my exact point. If you look at the redacted Remilios and the Miladies chart for the past couple of weeks, it's pretty much been up only. So whether people knew that was coming, I don't know, or whether people were just assuming that because that momentum was going up, they were going to jump on the bandwagon in the hopes that something was coming. I think if you look at in the past 24 hours, you look at Block Games Dice, like that has had the NFT has had like a 75% drop. I think the farming that was going on there, the farmers were really unhappy with the result, the outcome. I think there was like a 5 million allocation out of $1 billion to them, and that had a pretty savage drop off. But if you bought the top on that, I think it hit 0.80. They're now at 0.1. So I think like trying to time these for specifically airdrops is probably not a good strategy. Unless you bought it way back when, trying to predict whether that's going to go forward. I think for me, I would probably look for projects that are starting to rise consistently, and then maybe assume that maybe there's some sort of news that people know about before it's happened. But trying to buy Miladies or redacted Remilios now after like a 2-week run up, I think is a bit silly. I would probably wait for it. Look at what's it called, Wassies as well, with the pump token that they like. That's just savage. Like, but it's a really good collection. I really like the collection. Like, there's some reputable people that rock that as a PFP. So I would seriously consider buying into that, like at now, just because it's gone down. Same with the gods, with the wormhole airdrop. Like all these different projects have suffered significantly. Even if you look at Pudgy, like they're down from 20 ETH down to about 12 now. And I don't know if like you factor that in and call it XDiv where you've had the airdrops. Maybe some of those benefits were priced in.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. Legendary, you want to go to you for a second? You're shaking your head there. Then I've got something funny to share, I guess.
Yeah, I wasn't shaking my head because I'm in disagreement with Sammy. Absolutely agree with everything he said. It just caused me a bit of pain to hear Wassies because I bought the absolute top on that collection at like 2-ish ETH per piece.
And what are they now?
0.5, 0.6, something like that.
Yeah, look, it happens, especially when there's this wild expectation of what could be to come. Did any of you see this? Talking about Miladies, talking about Remilios, did any of you see their cousins? Retardio cousins. I'm just quoting, so don't at me about my language. Retardio cousins trading at 11 Sol. This is on Sol. I think these minted out for basically nothing the other day. I don't know the exact details, but I believe it was like less than a Sol. Like that's where the chart indicates. And in the last few days has just gone like up to 10 Sol. So I don't know if they're involved in some way. Seems to be part of the family in some respect. If you look at the collection, I'm showing it for the people watching in on YouTube and watching on X as well. But yeah, did any of you guys catch this? Did you know about it at all?
First time hearing from me.
I did see it, but I just didn't look any closer. I was just like, it's probably a derivative. But turns out it's not.
Interesting. Okay, well, those exist as well, and they've done pretty well. I mean, they've outperformed other things in the last week or so. So interesting to see. Let's get into a bit of a roundup today of the news from the Snapshot newsletter. As you know, I write this newsletter every single week. It goes out on a Friday. And we've got some key pieces of news that's happened this week, which I'm going to share with Sammy and Legendary, and then they're going to consider and digest what they think will be worth paying attention to more so than the other things as we move forward in the next 7, 14 days and the next month. So the first kind of recap piece of news was that the Rune nodes dropped to Nodemonkes trading at 0.04 BTC. But while that was happening, the Rune PUPs rise to 0.11 BTC and Rune Stones hit 0.09 BTC as well. So clearly there's a Bitcoin Rune Mania right now. Complete mania, which is very high level of speculation. The really good thing that I think I found as part of writing this article this week was a proper explainer of what runes are, because I don't know if I could have confidently said, despite people coming up on stage sometimes and explaining it and saying this is what it is, I found just a great explainer. So I'm going to read it through, because if I feel that, I can bet that there's 70 to 80% of other people, if not more, who are just like, well, what exactly is this thing? So I'm going to read it out as an explainer, and then I'll read the other things. So I said, why are runes ripping so hard? So first we need to understand what runes are. And this was an explanation from DeFi Monk. He said, first, the difference between ordinals and runes. Ordinals are arbitrary data inscriptions in the form of text, images, or videos inscribed onto individual Satoshis. Runes, however, is a novel protocol developed by the same mind behind ordinals, Casey. Runes are more akin to ERC20 tokens, enabled by a distinctive UTXO model, which is cleaner than BRC20. These are fungible and will be the go-to standard for BTC tokens. Now, why are they moving up so aggressively? Runes won't be out until the halvening, but PUPs token and other soon-to-be runes protocols are pre-launching as pre-runes and will migrate over to the runes infrastructure at launch. And that's why a token like PUPs is up over 1,000% this week, because people, and when this writer says people, they mean Ansem, who is the main character on Twitter at the moment, realize that these are essentially the first representative meme coins on Bitcoin. And that's the explanation, which I thought was very, very helpful. So I hope that was a helpful explanation. In terms of some other bits of news from the week, we had a huge run on XCOPY sales. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on whether you think all of those digital art bags that you bought back in the day are going to be coming back. Does this XCOPY run this week, where on one day we saw more than 260 ETH worth of sales? Does that mean XCOPY continues to run? Does that mean other art continues to run? I want to hear your thoughts on that. And then kind of reflected on the Pudgy Penguins founder, Luke and Net, saying that there will be multiple 100 ETH NFTs this cycle. The idea being that everything will be tokenized, including culture. And although people look down on it now, it will become more obvious in the future that culture itself will be tokenized, as will everything else. So definitely want to think about that. And then we had the news that SEC was moving to sue Uniswap, which I thought was very significant, although crypto seemed fairly resilient against that news. So is that something to be concerned about or not? Maybe let's go to Sammy first. What are your thoughts here? If there was one that you particularly interests you, or that you think we've got to pay attention to moving forward, or maybe there might be more, but maybe just one to start with before we go to Legendary. What is it for you?
So I think I had a conversation with a couple of people last night at the Modern Market meetup, and their attention was on runes. Okay. I think that, I mean, it does give me that early ETH vibes. I think the fact that you've got these pre-runes don't necessarily allocate you a corresponding number of the rune. So there could be a gas war coming into when those runes actually get minted, which I found pretty interesting, where you could end up paying like $500 or $1,000 in Bitcoin gas to get that early inscription or early rune stone. So I find that pretty interesting, just having gone through the whole ETH mania. It's something I'm beginning to turn my attention to. So currently it was on blast, but I think Ordinals just seems to be not going away. There seems to be a lot of traction on the timeline with Ordinals, so it's something that I want to dig in deeper, and I think there's a huge potential coming into the halvening.
Sure.
I just don't have an in-depth knowledge to talk about it comprehensively at the moment. I think just speaking to people, it just seems to be where the attention is. And I think that wherever the attention goes, that's where the money flows. So,
yeah, I like that idea. I definitely agree with you in that respect, just in terms of attention. One of the things I noticed, which I thought was, I feel like this type of thing could be a top-ish signal, but where like completely less technical people are going around trying to set up Bitcoin nodes. I don't know if you've seen that. There's like all this stuff on the timeline about how can I set up these nodes in order to be able to snipe some of this stuff better, because apparently that's going to give you a better advantage in order to get some of this stuff, which I think a portion of which will be a fair launch. Although again, not like perfectly informed on this stuff, but I have seen that on the timeline. I wondered, like, is that realistic, Sammy?
I think it probably is. I mean, we spoke about NFT stats post the other day around people buying stuff on Magic Eden and then it dropping off because someone had sniped it because they have a node themselves. I do think, though, the pricing, I think the gas becomes a feature as opposed to a floor. Like, I think if you look back at the ETH NFTs, a lot of the time the gas price was baked into the actual price of the NFT on the secondary market anyway. So I think if you're paying $1,000 in Bitcoin gas, like, you can expect at least that to be baked into the secondary market price. I don't think people are necessarily going to sell it for less than that. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays out again. But if it doesn't, then it could be a bit of a flop. Like you said, there could be a bit of a top signal. But if it does, then you could see a hell of a bull market where people see all this money flowing into the space, these high prices again. Gas becomes irrelevant because people are just FOMOing in. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And I think the infrastructure is getting better. Like a year ago, it was pretty terrible. But now just having, like, I think Saigar sent a post yesterday around the volume that Magic Eden has, largely because of Ordinals.
Yeah.
And that to me suggests that either people are farming Magic Eden through Ordinals, or there's actual real demand for this. And that seems to be like a UI that people have become familiar with. So it's just interesting to observe those trends.
Yeah, good point on Magic Eden. Like, they basically have managed to establish a Bitcoin ordinal monopoly, and they're definitely printing as a consequence. But it'll be interesting to see if that manages to maintain as we move forward. Legendary, want to come to you in a second, maybe to pick out a different one of these news pieces that you think is important to keep in mind, or just for your general commentary. But K Sensei's joined us, has their hand raised. I'm pretty sure she has some more detailed BTC knowledge than us. So K Sensei, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, GM everyone. I'm not like a Bitcoin expert by any means, but I have been looking at runes for a bit, and what I want to say is there's a lot of variety on what's happening, because first of all of these rune mining collections, quote unquote, it's essentially an IOU, are approaching it differently. So there's different supplies. Some you like lose your allocation if you sell it, others you don't. There's boosters, so it takes some involvement. And I think there's a lot of people who are like trying to FOMO into it now, who might be, shooting themselves in the foot because the FOMO is so high. You might be just buying a local top. That's one. Like, for example, Runestone, which has like an insane supply. Who's going to be buying that post-launch? I'm not sure. Also, we're like, obviously fees are going to be pretty high post-halvening. Everyone expects that. So I don't know how good some of these plays are. And I have the same feelings about the crowd of people suddenly trying to set up Bitcoin nodes. Because, ordinals have been out for over a year now. There's a lot of people who have set up their nodes over that time, learned to operate this whole thing. And you, with your amateur knowledge, with a Bitcoin node you've been operating for a week, might not be in as much of an advantage as you think. And tools to participate in all this are being built pretty rapidly. There's even like mempool sniping tools being developed for laymen at this point. So, I'm not sure how much it's worth doing all this super prep. Like, it's so new, you're not gonna miss out. Just don't FOMO into things would be my take on all of this. Yeah, maybe find like a good pre-mining project, or don't sit on your hands and don't miss it once it's like a little bit stabilizing.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that contribution. It's really, really helpful, because I completely agree with you. I can just imagine people who are like not very sophisticated or not very technical doing all kinds of strange things, like pressing weird. But I mean, I literally have no idea about the process. But in order to try to get something on a chain which they're unfamiliar with, it's, you can just see it happening in advance. I heard someone yesterday, maybe it was at the meetup, Sammy, someone talking about like it's going to be like an other side. It's going to be like an other side event. And I don't know what that looks like, what kind of car crash that would be like on Bitcoin, but I don't know. It's just so much slower and things are harder. So it could potentially be worse, right?
I think, I don't know. I think it depends, because I think the other side, they took the proceeds, the mint proceeds. There's obviously gas wastage. So that's liquidity that's extracted from the market, but also you have a hell of a lot in terms of mint proceeds that are taken from the market and put into the Yuga treasury. So that's immediate liquidity taken from the market that would otherwise be spent on secondary market NFTs. Whereas I think Ordinals and Runes might be a little bit different in that sense. So it'd be interesting to see where the capital flows. And once those runes are minted, what the funds are used for.
Okay, I think K Sensei wants to come back in on that. Oxy, I see with your hand raised as well. I want to hear from you. We'll jump to Legendary first to get his thoughts before, but K Sensei first, you want to come straight back in?
Yeah, just quickly, I don't mean to poo-poo anyone's efforts. Like, a lot of communities have been very helpful to people who want to get more technical.
Sure.
But there's another thing that's happening that I think is going to contribute to the overall chaos, and it's the Epic Sat, which is the first Sat of the first block post halving. We haven't had one minted yet since the Ordinal protocol launched. Are miners going to snipe this? Is there going to be like a fee war on that front? So it's kind of a different dimension of the chaos that's going to ensue post halving, and I'm curious to see how that's going to affect everything, because everyone's just going to throw their money in different directions. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
People are scared of like a block reorg. I don't know. I'm not expert enough to know if that's going to happen, but expectations are very high.
Yeah, you can tell that people are really, really going for it at the moment. And I take your point on, people are trying to help people, which is really good. Sometimes you've got to know your limitations. It's like, look, if you're not a technical person, could be pretty, like we've done it on ETH as well. Like when you're going somewhere and doing something like a bit out of your comfort zone, and then like your ETH goes missing, like it doesn't feel good, does it? So just be careful with what you choose to do. Legendary, want to check in with you first. We've been speaking about the Ordinals for a bit, on the runes, the pre-runes. What are your thoughts here before we go to Oxy?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. First of all, that pre-runes meta, we spoke about, do cycles or trends, not cycles, do trends get faster once they get replicated on other chains? And basically we see that pre-runes meta kind of mimicking what we do with token pre-sales from gaming NFTs, mimicking meme pre-sales all in one together. And I'm actually quite happy that during the Halvening, I'm going to be in Dubai and I don't have time to like try to trade this and out trade other people, because I fully agree with K-Sensei, you're not going to outsmart someone who's been doing that longer than you. Like, I very much remember how happy I was with ETH mints once I had my private mempool, private RPC, everything set up, and I was able to mint just a tiny bit faster, save a bit on gas, and get my mints. And then came the Arbitrum airdrop, and I was so fucking confident because of the large Arbitrum backed claim. I got my private RPC, my TX goes through a private mempool, I'm gonna be just fine. And it took me almost an hour to be able to claim it, and people were claiming who had a way more sophisticated setup than I had, obviously. And I had the edge with minting for a time. But when it's about real money, you can be sure that people have been preparing for that moment, and they do have a setup in place. Plus, they have funds available to spend to achieve a goal that they want to achieve. And you're not going to be able to outsmart or outprice them on that.
I can't say anything to add to that final point that you just said. I completely agree with that. It's like knowing where you are on the, you know how we talk about the informational totem pole, knowing where you are on the technical skill totem pole, and just like accepting your position because you think you're going to make an effort to do something, as if the people more technical than you won't know how to do it better. I think that's a really important point to make. The other thing I was agreeing with first, though, that you were saying is I was literally thinking yesterday that everything's getting speed run on this chain. Like, just think how long it took for us to realize that the majority of NFTs, I'm not saying every single one on ETH, like the purpose of them is to be a vehicle to produce some ERC20 tokens. We went through a whole cycle of thinking that you actually really love the art, you actually really love the community. And yes, there's still an element of that, of tokenized culture, etc. But it seems to be really pushing towards the direction of that. On Bitcoin, it's like these things launched only a few weeks ago. the ordinals launched only a few weeks ago, and they can't even get the token out just yet. So instead of releasing the token, they even got to release the pre-token so that you get the token. Like, and it was actually making me wonder, and I didn't come to a conclusion because I was thinking about this just yesterday. It made me wonder, like, what's the point of the ordinal after all? Is it just the same as when ETH NFTs have an airdrop? There's always like some intrinsic value, but we've basically sped run the whole process where people are getting the end thing because there isn't anything after those tokens. That's the point. Once those tokens drop, as we know with ApeCoin, for example, then it's just about, okay, genuinely, what can you build as a company or as a community, etc. So what, like, there isn't anything after that. So are these companies and protocols even sophisticated enough or been around long enough to know what comes next? Or they've just sped run to their end goal straight away? Legendary, what are your reflections on that? Then we'll go to Oxy.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, we had that honeymoon phase on ETH with NFTs. You have an Azuki, you have a Bored Ape, and it's pumping and nothing really has happened, but it's the first anime art that's meaningful. It's the first ape, etc. You just don't have that time for honeymoons anymore on other chains. It's an absolute speedrun. Look at Ink on BTC. Nobody really talks about that anymore. It was there, and it was the same. Oh, it's going to be the Azuki of BTC of Ordinals. It had a quick honeymoon period, pump dumped. I think I just looked it up at 0.01 something, and that honeymoon period got killed. And now we are like, we see the end game on ETH, and the end game is ERC20s, whether that's an airdrop from an NFT or a Memecoin or whatever, and nothing else really matters. And there's no point in taking the same amount of time and take like 1 year to admire the beauty of an art of an ordinal and to pump that into infinity. And we're like, nah, give me the token, give me something else, and then we'll take it from there, because that waiting period completely gets eliminated.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. I'd been reflecting on that yesterday. Very, very glad we articulated that the way we did. Oxy, your hand was raised, my friend. What are your thoughts on these ordinals absolutely speed running the process straight to runes? What are your thoughts here, my friend?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I was kind of going to say the same thing that Legendary was just saying about it essentially being pre-sales, and you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly that. It's a speed run to the end goal of tokenizing whatever you're putting out to market. What I found interesting the other day, Leonidas was like, obviously this is completely speculation, and it kind of gives a little bit of insight into what the tokenomics might even kind of look like for something like a runestone. But he said if it flips with, then it's each runestone's worth 0.5 Bitcoin. If it flips sheep, it's like 2.13 Bitcoin. But it's interesting that they're comparing market caps to kind of get a little bit of an insight into like what the tokenomics might look like once that kind of launches, I suppose. Because I don't think we've really, like, I have no idea what it's going to look like. What does it, after the Halvening, when runes drop, like what's it actually look like? Is it like literally a meme coin? I guess I just don't really know enough about it to answer that, but I don't know, just thought it was an interesting point that we got a little insight into.
Yeah, look, I think it's really, really interesting that and it reveals the true nature and the true intention of the existence of the project, right? Like if the projects that you pull up as like reasonable comparisons are the top meme coins on either Solana or ETH right now, then that is the true end state and nature of your own project. So yeah, that's the goal. The goal is to go as high as those. And so I think those are reasonable comparisons. Now, whether they actually go there is going to require some some work, making sure you do all the things that all the other coins that have managed to do that. You need to maintain the attention and create the narrative as well. But I'm just sharing this tweet from Renegade Master, who, if you don't follow, you should actually definitely check out, because someone who was around in the previous cycle, traded exceptionally well, was more loud, did really well, then kind of just chilled out later on, and has kind of come back. And I don't feel like he gets as much I mean, this tweet has got a lot of traction, but I don't know if he's as followed as he was in the previous cycle. But he's doing a similar thing. He's just talking about these runes in terms of market caps. So forget the NFT. PUPs is currently at a 686 million market cap, and by the way, I think it's gone higher since this post. Nodes is currently at a 68 million market cap. Ombi is at a 4.5 million market cap. So that is the lens through which people are viewing these assets. So very important to articulate that. Glad we got that out. Legendary, any kind of reflections on that before we maybe move on? I think Sammy might have had a take as well, but I'll come to him in a sec.
Yeah, I'll quickly connect it to another point that you mentioned in your newsletter, the XCOPY run. And I feel like, for me, I'm so holding back on trading art. Like, I did buy those flies by XCOPY. Someone converted them into a token, but nothing really happened from that, because there's more to the art market and trading the art market than there is to trading the rest of the market, which to me feels way simpler, because it's so reduced to the bare minimum of, we want a token and that token ought to go up in price if it gets enough attention, and if the main characters basically of this cycle, like Ansem and other people, talk about it and say, this is the #1 meme officially on BTC, and the rest agrees. It is a very, once you acknowledge that, like whether you like it or not, that this is what we are trading and this is how we're looking at things, I find it much simpler. And there's like beauty in that simplicity of trading that. Whereas with the art market, I burned way too much money on buying art. And this is why I'm completely staying away from that.
Yeah, I think it's fair. We actually had an interesting conversation at the meetup yesterday with some, like, I think pretty big collectors. They've been collecting. They collected aggressively in the previous thing, collected some great stuff, but also got, ended up with a whole load of stuff that is entirely illiquid now. And one of the points that were made, and I think Legendary, you've made a similar point before, is that it's kind of difficult to criticize artists in the space. Like, on some level, they're kind of like this protected species where, because it's art, you have to be really nice to them all the time. And yet there were genuinely people, and then they ask, like, oh, why are you only buying big artists? Why are you not supporting emerging artists? Like, well, I have supported emerging artists, and then they disappeared after a few weeks. What do you want me to do? You want me to just give my money to people who are going to disappear every 4 weeks? Like, no, you're gonna have to prove yourself, and it takes time for you to be able to prove yourself. And I don't mind supporting someone who's like going to be a part, like if they need some support, and I just get a good sense that they're going to be around. But that's the burden's on them to prove it. Legendary, you came off mute.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that really annoys me in this space, that you can't really criticize artists without having a massive pushback on that. Like, I know Artihans, good friend of mine, massive collector. Yeah, he has made the point that a couple artists he collected suddenly started minting the very same piece of art on a different blockchain, whether it's on Base, and be like, yeah, no, I'm just experimenting with a new medium. No, you're just being a lazy fuck and minting the same shit again and hoping to find someone who pays for that again. And he got a massive pushback, and he did word it not as bluntly as I put it now. He put it very eloquently. And it is a bit annoying. And this is one more reason why I hold back from like continue to trade in that market. The only reason why I buy art, and that happens very rarely these days, as opposed to the last cycle where I like basically was buying every day, is when I like something and I wouldn't care if that goes to zero and having that. And that barely never happens anymore, to be honest, because I unfortunately lost the joy in collecting art for exactly those reasons. Like, you support someone, a couple of weeks later, they left the space, and it is a bit also of a sense of an entitlement to have to support people. Like, I know last cycle, the more successful artists, Park, Trevor Jones, and all the others, they were like people, they're like almost forced to buy other people's art. They're like, oh, you made 50 mil with your art. Why don't you take 5 mil and support poor artists with that? So I don't know. It's a weird thing. Sorry for my rant on that.
No, it's an interesting conversation to have, and I hope that the artists in the audience, of which I can scroll through and I can see people who are involved in the art market, whether they're artists themselves or in the art arena, don't take it in an overly negative sense. Because like I still like the reason why I got into the space was because of art, because I thought it was really cool that digital artists could mint this work and make money. The nuanced take here is that like there's a way to go about it, there's a way to do the business, and sometimes it has felt that hasn't necessarily been done completely honestly in the way that, you know, I think everyone is able to receive criticism, and it just feels almost a little bit protected from their perspective. But I hope that's an interesting perspective from a collector's perspective, because I'm actually a collector that does still actively collect. That's something I think. So hopefully that is intriguing to people and makes them have a second thought. Sammy, wanted to bring you in here. I don't know whether you wanted to come in on that or something else. K-Sensei has their hand raised as well. Funky, I know you did too. Did you have a take on the art in particular? As you think one up, I just wanted to share quickly from the newsletter. XCOPY actually sold this one of one in the last 24 hours for 255 ETH. That is $900,000 at today's prices. The super rare page is just loading. I'm showing it for the people watching it on video. But to be honest, it doesn't matter whether it loads or not, because it's zero. There's nothing there. So just entertaining piece of factual information for you. Sold like a blank image for 255 ETH to the very prominent collector, Moderate Art. But it's a secondary sale, not a primary one. Sammy, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I mean, I quite enjoyed collecting editions just because I don't like locking up significant amounts of capital into potentially illiquid JPEGs. I do think that you look at things like dark farms, like the Smalls and that kind of stuff, like any art that I vibe with, I'm happy to support, and especially if they're pushing the boundaries on what they can do. And same with so Jack Butcher with the Pepens and VV and all that kind of stuff. So I think in the modern age, I'm interested in people that are pushing the boundaries of what art is, and I'll support with that. But I don't like locking it up in single items. I tend to sweep maybe a dozen or 100 or so of their open editions and then just hold them, because I'm happy to let them go to zero. It's not a significant amount of money that's outlaid, and it's just like, okay, well, worst case scenario, I like the artists, I believe in what they're doing, I felt like I supported them, and I will carry on just looking and appreciating the work that they've produced. If something comes of it, great. If not, then it's something that I feel like I've bought because I want to buy it, rather than buying in the anticipation that there's going to be an accrual of value to that.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the way to collect art, isn't it? You've got to have that appreciation, which I do. I think that's what Legendary was saying as well. I do have. It's like if I'm buying the stuff now, it's like, look, it could go up, could go down. I don't really mind. I just really, really like it. So that is ultimately the way to do it. I want both of you to reflect on, and maybe get your thoughts in a second after we go to K-Sensei. Like, does this mean that art is actually going to come back? We've spoken about some of the rants and had a bit of a rant about certain things, but is this run on XCOPY going to be good for Squiggles? Is it going to be good for other stuff? Like, are we there in the cycle just yet? Want to hear your thoughts. K-Sensei, your hand is raised. What are your thoughts here from the art side?
I mean, my thoughts that the crypto art market is very different from traditional art market, because there's no gatekeepers that exist in the traditional art market. There's no gallery that's sort of chosen the artist to represent and make sure they're represented, and continuously sort of supports their work being in the public eye. It's permissionless. Everyone can mint their art. And you might buy it, and that person will go away forever, and you're stuck with their like postcard NFT, which is great in some way, but probably complicates investing in art compared to traditional markets. Yeah. And yeah, I'm not sure what this XCOPY run means for the rest of art, but it's never going away. It's like such a big section of the space, and it's wonderful it exists. So yeah, looking forward to seeing more art sales.
Yeah, I take that point. I definitely, and it's a huge opportunity. I actually think it's awesome that artists can do these kind of low cost, cheap mints on the L2s as well. I've seen like people mint out loads on base, or doing interesting things on Farcaster by minting frames like at a very low cost, and just more potential business models I think are pretty cool. So that's interesting to see. Headline, quick take, Legendary, before we hit the next headline. XCOPY run, bullish for the rest of art, like right here, right now in the next few weeks? Is that something you'd monitor? So you think it's just XCOPY run and then back to meme coins next week?
I don't think it will have a broader impact on the rest of the art market. There's too much attention that goes to other topics. We talked about the runes, airdrop farming, other meme coin trading, Solana, someone at some point coming back from the state of being a congested blockchain to actually working. Too many other things to look at. Restaking narrative still strong, and it's the money who's still collecting art to a big extent is the quote unquote like old money. Even the XCOPY purchase you showed is moderates art who bought it. It's been collecting for years and years and years. And it's not like that the new main characters, Ansem is not talking about collecting art. Others are not. So I don't think that this has a meaningful impact in the short run for the rest of the art market.
Fair enough. Let's get into the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that has happened in the space in the last 24 hours before we hit the final headline and close out the show for the week. This comes from the Snapshot, which is pinned up top as always. Legendary mentioned this at the top of the show. Omni announces an airdrop for Eigenlayer restakers and select NFT holders. I believe it was Pudgy Penguins included, Remelios, Miladies, and maybe one or two others. Definitely need to check if that is relevant to you. Should be a good airdrop. Number 2, Solana NFT lending protocol Sharkify announces TG for April 16th. That's next week. This was an interesting piece of news. $26 million liquidation on Pack Finance after team allegedly updates the liquidation threshold. It was explained by OX Kaido. $26 million got liquidated on Pack Finance, a lending protocol on Blast. A wallet presumably controlled by Pack Finance updated the liquidation threshold, allegedly unannounced, without a time lock. $26 million got liquidated within 6 seconds after the update. Their take was that this is designing a lending protocol that allows someone to arbitrarily alter the liquidation threshold without a time lock isn't just poor design, it is irresponsible. This is obviously the second big blunder on Blast. Remember, Munchables got hacked for $62 million a couple of weeks ago. That managed to get saved, and those funds have been returned to people. We'll have to wait and see what happens here. Just another reminder, I guess, to be cautious of where you deposit your funds, particularly on newer protocols on Blast. Next, Block social farmers complain at insignificant payout. I saw a lot of unhappiness yesterday on the timeline, and actually a trend happening at the moment where all of these social farming strategies, since Portal was so successful, have not necessarily been paying out to the people producing the messages on the timeline. So there's all kinds of details there if you want to read more on what precisely happened. Getting into some more news, NFL player Demario Davis says he is Bitcoin only now. I think it was Matt yesterday on the show saying that's one of the top signs of a market when athletes start coming out to saying that they don't want corrupt fiat, they just want to get paid in Bitcoin. So I leave you to decide where we are in the cycle when he's getting paid only in Bitcoin. Next, Bitcoin lending protocol Liquidium announces runes lending and borrowing coming soon. And finally, Azuki announces episode 1 of Anime Anthology to release on April the 30th with a pretty cool teaser video. So that is the Web3 roundup from the Snapshot, as always, pinned up top. We have 5 minutes left for today. I think we were going to hit the final headline, Legendary, which was to do with Cyrus giving this very large loan. He gave a 1.25 Bitcoin loan against a Nodemonke. But the interesting thing about this loan, so just to give you the details as explained by Cyrus, I'm showing it for the people watching in. The best rate they could have got on Bitcoin was 0.4 BTC at 90% APR for 16 days. And that's because the infrastructure on Bitcoin, as things stand, doesn't allow you to make like specific nuanced offers as a lender to potential borrowers. You just have to stick it in the pool, and whatever the top rate is at the time, that's what you get back. So this, the way they got around it was that the borrower threw the monk in an emblem vault, transferred it over to ETH, listed it on Arcade, and accepted a much better offer. So I say 1.25 Bitcoin as the headline number, but actually that was 25 ETH that the loan was valued at. So yeah, that's the headline there. Legendary, any reflections on that piece of news and anything else maybe where you want to take this conversation as we close out the show?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's cool. I mean, emblem vaults are a cool thing. It's nice that you can go this route and be like, obviously Liquidium is the protocol that only allows you on BTC to borrow against an LTV that's determined by the floor value of the ordinal, that you can package it up and get a deal done for a rare one on ETH. And that to me is like validating the value of it in a very strong way, because it takes two things. It takes someone who puts in the effort to wrap it, to go on Arcade, to probably pre-negotiate the deal with Cyrus, and don't go on a limp on doing that. I do think that person was looking for a loan actively, and that someone is willing to take this. So I think it's pretty cool. And from a technical perspective, I also like it. I do start to feel a bit of regret. Obviously, I talked on the show a couple of times that I use Liquidium quite intensely. And now I'm looking at basically everything that I was lending BTC out against, and all those collections are up a tremendous amount. And like the only thing for me, and it's such a horrible thing to say, that remains is to hope that someone defaults on one of my loans, so I get like a cheap PUP or whatever. Where the smarter play would have been to maybe do 80% of what I did, or 70% in loans, and just buy a couple of those assets and be happy about them, and not having to hope like a loan shark that someone defaults on that, so I get my discounted puppet or whatever else I'm lending against.
Yeah, that's a fair take. It's just part of the business, I guess, of being a lender, which is kind of uncomfortable in some way. I know how Cyrus does it, where he'll always reach out to the people and be like, "Look, did you make a mistake? Is this okay? Like, if you want, like, even though you made a mistake, like, do you want to just pay the interest back and then you can have the asset back? Like, I won't liquidate you." That's always an option. If you want to be the nice guy, Legendary, feeling bad, being the bad guy. One of the reflections I had, though, as you were talking, it's like people always talk about the value of ETH and like how it's lost in all of this stuff. But to me, this is complete validation of the idea that ETH is just so much more developed. If you think of all these chains as cities, and Brett always talks about this, good friend of the show, speaks about how like the infrastructure that's got built in the city of Ethereum is far more advanced than anything else. And so even if Bitcoin builds this infrastructure up, ETH is going to build something else by then, right? Because the devs are always pushing the chain forward in another way. So there's the value prop of ETH right there. Like there's certain things that you just can't do on other chains. And if people want to do them now, especially for high value assets, people want to do them right now. So they're going to have to come over to the chain, which is able to facilitate and serve their need. Sammy, do you have any reflections on that as we get ready to close out?
Yeah, I think, I mean, looking at chains in isolation, I think the future is going to be omni-chain. I think there's going to be a lot more seamless user interfaces that enable you to literally take out those loans on ETH for Bitcoin assets. I've already seen lending arrangements where you have it on, so you deposit collateral on like an L1, and then you've got layer 2s that you can take out loans on. So it's like, actually that's happening already. And I think it's only a matter of time before we can do that between ETH and Bitcoin a lot more seamlessly. I think 12 months from now, we'll probably see that. So I do think that liquidity is going to be unlocked, and you're going to have a more fluid way of seeing that in the not too distant future.
Okay, interesting. Final take. Funky, your hand is raised. We're talking trash about your chain. Stand up for Bitcoin, Funky. What do you got to say?
No, actually, I was just going to say, to your point, B, like after taking almost a week to get something off Solana, I was very happy to use Ethereum yesterday when I was doing all the stuff that Brett had talked about with Pendle and whatnot. And I just loved how it was so, yeah, it cost gas, but you know what? It worked every time. I hit submit, it went through. And to Sammy's point, I think it's going to be a lot sooner than 12 months from now, because that thing I was trying to tell you guys about, Bob, they just passed 200 million TVL. The founder had asked about, is everybody ready to trade runes on Bob? And if you haven't looked into Bob, it is basically an ETH L2 hybrid that talks to Bitcoin. So this, and I would not fade this team. These guys have been doing this for a long time. So I think that infrastructure is coming very, very soon.
Interesting. Okay, so that's clearly the point, right? That I think that is very interesting. And when you shared that information with me about Bob, I did actually take action on it. I did provide some liquidity there as well. I thought it was a very useful thing, and you said they're a good team too. So definitely on the lookout. And as you said, it's not just Bob doing this. There's other people who've raised recently for like L2s on Bitcoin, which definitely keeping an eye on from both an investment perspective, but also just practical use and to make sure Bitcoin can continue its economic activity and keep up with the other chains. Legendary, I felt like you might have wanted to do a little closeout. Any final thought before we wrap this?
Yeah, well, going back one last time to the city analogy, I think it's so good. It's such a rare situation that, well, obviously BTCC is going to catch up and build out their infrastructure as well. ETH is going to continue building, and if you look like in Web 2, there's very few industries where you have a position like that. One of which is the semiconductor industry. I have a couple of companies who are dominating building semiconductors, and others simply cannot catch up to them because while they're catching up, manufacturing standards, etc., change when you have smaller and smaller semiconductors. And it's kind of the same thing they have about ETH. Obviously, BTC is going to be fast to build out infrastructure, but ETH is not gonna stall in the meantime, not gonna maintain the status quo. They will keep building, and it's going to be hard to catch up on that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but saying it's a very challenging thing to do.
I agree with you. And I think that's the nuance that it's very good that we brought out today. And we do it every day, and we'll do it next week as well. We will be back on Monday. As always, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT. Thank you so much to my co-hosts, as always, Sammy and Legendary. Thank you to our speakers today. We had Oxy, we had Funky, we had K Sensei. And thank you to you guys in the audience for joining us again. Once again, this week, we've had 100 to 200 live listeners with us every single day. We're doing many, many more views on YouTube, Spotify now as well. If you need us, we're on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on all of those places, should you wish. We'll be in Dubai next week. So if you are around, if you'd like to hang out, we'll be doing a breakfast. Send us a message. And if you want to hang out more generally, let us know. We'll be in Dubai. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.